there's like this triplet of like influence at the core, and there's a way of manipulation to achieve influence and a way of inspiration to achieve it. Manipulation gives short-term kind of return on investment, and you can grow large corporations with that and stuff like that, or empires. Long-term, it falls flat, whereas inspiration grows deep roots and can really, over many, many, many years or even generations, change the world forever.
Welcome to the Allo.Capital podcast. If you're just joining us, we're summoning Allo.Capital, a new spin-out from Gitcoin that's designed to build the capital allocation layer of the tokenized internet. I think there's big upside here. Capital allocation is a multi-trillion-dollar design space with VCs, NGOs, and governments all needing to allocate capital in order to survive and thrive. It's a place where we can start small. Every time you spend money, you are allocating capital. We are threading a through line, partnering with builders, researchers, and funders to figure out what on-chain, post-AI, capital allocation will look like and building it in the new internet. If you want to learn more, visit our website at Allo.Capital, where you can download the Allo books for free, play with some of our dApps, join the Telegram, or participate in the DAO. My guest today is David Rugg. He is a metaphysician, civilizational theorist, and founder of Project Liminality, which is an open source communication platform designed to transform fragmentation into unity. He has a background in physics from Heidelberg University and inspiration from the Game B movement. David's work blends systems thinking, storytelling, technology, and most notably through his Interbrain project to create new ways for humanity to share ideas, build trust, and address our greatest collective challenges. All right, I'm excited about this episode because David is one of the most lucid thinkers and storytellers about the meta crisis, Game B, and liminality that I've discovered in my travails in that direction. So if you've been following my podcasting career for a while, you may have listened to my episodes with Daniel Schmachtenberger and with Jordan Greenhall. Basically, this is a group of people who are working to solve, to sense make, about the liminal space that we're in between the industrial age and the networked age, and then also solving something that we call the meta crisis, which is basically the generator functions, the systemic reasons behind all of the crises that humanity follows. So just like a quick brush up on that set of ideas. Basically, the idea is to find a third attractor, basically a middle path between freedom and control. Okay, you have too much freedom, you get chaos. You have too much control, you get dystopia. What is a way that we could build systems such that they are not capturable, controllable? This is the problem with Web 2. And they're also not granting too much freedom where people can intersect with other people's rights, and like, so basically, how do we build a middle path between interconnectedness and our sovereignty? Is this search for a third attractor in our digital systems and our network age is what this whole group of podcasters in the liminal web space are working on. And so I would say that David's very much in the liminal web sense making space, not very in the crypto space, and so I'm excited to build a bridge and sort of play jazz on all the same things that we're talking about: solving the meta crisis, public goods funding, solving multipolar traps. And that's why I think this was a fun episode. Enjoy. Hey, David, how's it going?
Going well. How about you?
Pretty good. Excited to have you on the podcast. I'm a big fan of your videos and your storytelling. And so I feel like we're discovering some similar things. And so excited to get into it. So maybe tee us off with what is Project Liminality and what is Interbrain?
Yeah, so for the longest time, I equated the two concepts behind these terms. And by now I have a bit more of a distinction there. So Project Liminality is a passion project, kind of a name and a symbol for a life mission of mine, to catalyze the shift of our species into liminal mind. And that contains the Interbrain as one aspect of it. I like to frame it as Project Liminality has the music, the musician, and the instrument as like three aspects of it. The Interbrain is the instrument, and that is a collective intelligence protocol, a digital communication medium, immune to propaganda, catalyzing emergent visions, turning into reality, something like that.
Yeah, so liminality, I understand, is being in between, an in-between stage. So I kind of interpret Project Liminality as we're in between the old world, the industrial world, and this new, like, more networked world. So is that a fair interpretation of the space that you sit at?
Yeah, so I first heard about the term in the kind of historical sense, like the time between worlds, that's like a liminal period, which has occurred many times in history. We're in the midst of, I think, the biggest ever of that liminal period. But I also, on a kind of more personal, subjective level, there's a state of mind that I would say is liminality as well, and that is when your old worldview breaks down and you don't have a new one yet, then you find yourself floating in this weird in-between space. And I think we are at the point, usually we call it a paradigm shift, where we abandon the old and quickly build a new one, and then we feel safe again. I think we're at the verge of a shift towards what Jordan Hall would call a transparadigmatic mind. So a type of mind that is not addicted to paradigms, but can kind of ground in something in a liminal space between all these paradigms, make use of all of them, not being attached to any of them.
Yeah, Jordan Hall is a friend of the podcast. We've also had Daniel Schmackenberger on, and I know that those episodes have been some of the favorite of some of my listeners, and so excited to continue the conversation with you. Would you consider yourself to be in the sort of like liminal podcasting arena with those guys, or how would you differentiate your work from theirs?
Well, yeah, they have been primary influences of mine. I would say so far I've been more, so far I would say I've been more a fly on the wall, observing, learning, and then trying to figure out what is my contribution to the space. I'm in the midst of taking more of an active role in that as well. But yeah, kind of liminal web was one of the attractors of Game B, this whole cluster of amazing people with amazing visions. Yeah. That's been my entry point.
So this fractals of liminality, we're in this
right.
generational liminality in the world, but then within the liminal web space, there's sort of like a generational turnover from the old guard into the new guard. Which like, this is very reductive and this is a very complex space, but I would say that like from the people who are just articulating the problem to the people who are building systems and institutions that could start to solve the problem is my conceptualization of the changeover, the generational changeover that I'm seeing in the liminal web. Yeah. Well, I'd love to maybe sort of point at the problem that we're trying to solve here. So there's an old world dying and a new world that's struggling to be born, and now we're in the time of monsters. There's also this idea of solving for the third attractor, solving for both control and freedom in our political economies. How would you articulate your sort of like life's goal or the goal of Interbrain and Project Liminality? If you could concisely like sort of point to that North Star, what would that look like?
So maybe briefly for the audience, like the third attractor framing is, I heard that first clearly articulated from Daniel Schmackenberger and kind of his people around him that try to break down kind of the essence of what we're facing here, the problem that we're facing here. You kind of already pointed to it, but basically both freedom and order are essential aspects of life. If we have one without the other, if they separate and isolate from each other, they both become pathologies that are equally undesirable. Excessive order without freedom leads to oppression. Excessive freedom without order leads to chaos. The third attractor is a placeholder term for whatever the integration of these two looks like, where they kind of feed back into each other in an upward spiral. And yeah, so I've been profoundly influenced and inspired by the framing of Game A versus Game B. I would say both pathological attractors, and yeah, Game A is the pointing to the current system, the world that is dying. Game B, whatever comes next, whatever positive, beautiful thing comes next, but not just anything. So both pathological attractors, I would say, fall under the Game A category. Either we blow ourselves up into chaos, or we turn into this perpetual kind of oppression machine, technocratic nightmare kind of thing. And yeah, for me, kind of as I said earlier, I was trying to find out how can I contribute. Like I was just beyond inspired, and I have so much respect for the thinkers in that space. And I was like, okay, I don't want to just regurgitate what they're saying. I want to find out, okay, what is my kind of unique contribution here. And Charles Eisenstein, who is kind of adjacent to that space, was a huge influence on me, who's very much talking about the importance of story. And I've been basically meditating on that for years now. Yeah, because kind of in a nutshell, like no matter how powerful a technology is, controlling the narrative above that determines how the technology is applied is so much more powerful. So like a tank, a regular tank is powerful, but the think tank is much more powerful than a material tank. And yeah, so for me, I try to kind of distill down the essence of what occurs to me to be the essential driver of the pathology of game A, and what I see as central to game A really functioning. And that is our relationship to story, which is very, very different in the West today than it was throughout most of human history. Like the vast majority of indigenous people have a very different relationship to stories as living beings. And so kind of just like we recognize that genetic organisms are alive, evolve, all of that stuff deserve respect and protection. Most of us, at least. There is a memetic organism aside to that as well. So just like life in the biosphere evolves, in the noosphere you have like memetic organisms evolving. And I've identified two things. One is that, in a nutshell, I would say story is that which mediates relationship. And that shows how central it is. Our story to anything, for example, a tree, but just the universe as a whole, basically determines how we behave towards it. If we think a tree is just a blob of wood, a growing renewable resource, we will cut it down and use it like that. But in an indigenous setting, there's a very different story of what a tree is. That leads to a very different behavior towards it. Like the dance between man and tree is mediated by the story about that. And so upstream of that is actually our relationship to story itself, our story about what a story is, which I just hinted at, that there are different versions. In the West, we think of it more like an information technology, whereas in more indigenous minds would really say it's a living being. And so basically, serving stories as beings, and like not just saying that and paying lip service to that, like embodying that, I think is the generator function of game B. Whereas using stories as tools or weapons, narrative warfare and all of that stuff, or even marketing, propaganda, like these are all different aspects of the same thing, I think are as far as upstream as I could identify to be the generator function of game A. So.
So if I were to reductively summarize what you said for the audience, it seems like finding the third attractor and moving us from game A to game B is your sort of like end game. Any pushback on that? Okay. And then it feels like your unique leverage point that you're pushing on is stories. And I've actually I just want to take a moment to sing your praises about your YouTube channel right here, because you're one of the best storytellers when it comes to talking about game B and the meta crisis and the fundamental things that are behind it. So if you're listening to this podcast, go subscribe to Project Liminality on YouTube. There's links in the show notes if you want to go check it out. But I can really tell that you identified that leverage point and you've really invested in or honed that skill set, because I'm not exaggerating. I was in tears when I was watching your videos, because I think that they're so good at articulating the dynamics behind these very abstract concepts. And so, yeah, go subscribe to Project Liminality on YouTube. But anyway, yeah, so that's your leverage point, is the storytelling, like competing in the intention economy, swimming upstream to like tell the story of game B and how to do these dynamics. Is that right?
Yeah, and there's a crucial kind of point of nuance there, because you were just using the words competing in the attention economy. There are two very different ways of approaching this. And I think there's a kind of game A and a game B way. The game A way would fall under like a marketing campaign type of thing. I looked up the other day what campaign, the etymology of campaign. And actually, it's a military metaphor. Like it comes from, it's very violent. So a marketing campaign literally energetically comes from, strategic military strategy type of thing. And that is like inseparable from the mass, the meaning crisis, mental health crisis that we're seeing today, is that we're waging wars on the minds and the attention of people. And then there's this other side, this other way of doing things that is much more gentle and, sustainable. And that is the game B way of doing things, which is authentically just trying to present the story in the most inspiring way, rather than the most manipulative way. So it's not like, for me, I don't have an agenda of what I want to happen when I work on a video, except for I want to be like, the only thing that I really care about is that whatever I'm feeling inside and how I relate to that vision, I want other people to see that. I have nothing else besides that, like downstream of no strategy, no agenda of how they should react to that. And so I think there's this like this triplet of like influence at the core, and there's a way of manipulation to achieve influence and a way of inspiration to achieve it. Manipulation is gives short-term kind of return on investment, and you can grow large corporations with that and stuff like that, or empires. Long-term, it falls flat, whereas inspiration grows deep roots and can really, over many, many, many years or even generations, change the world forever. Like, I don't know, Christianity was started by inspiration, I would say, at the core at least. And yeah, an example.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction. And I love the idea of sort of like a game A approach to this versus like a game B one. And I think that's an important one to make. And what I'm feeling over here is that I'm getting this sense that you've identified this leverage point of narrative storytelling as your leverage point. And all the people I hang out with, all of like the systems change bros in the Web3 community, kind of look at it as like, oh, our lever is building new institutions using crypto. So like the hardness of traditional institutions is in the real world. It's their people, it's their processes, but they're fundamentally flawed because it's all people at the end of the day. And so what if we could build smart contracts that are unchangeable, that provide that hardness in the digital realm, and then we could use that to route money to things like solving public goods funding, or giving money to people who are playing the like game B sort of attention economy type of game. And so I guess what I'm reflecting here is the complementariness, I don't think that's the word, complementariness of storytelling and sort of like building new crypto institutions that support this transition into this new world. And so, I'm wondering if you could react to that. I mean, I don't know if you follow crypto at all, and the green pill audience is very different from your standard libertarian, like hyper financialized crypto person. But, you could react to that as like a storyteller. What do you know about crypto, and what would have to be true for you to feel like we're brothers in arms in solving this problem together?
So yeah, I definitely am probably more into crypto than the average person, but far away from the level of expertise that probably most people in your audience are. But I know the essential, the key insights that kind of hold the space. So what comes up for me is, the immanent metaphysics, as you could, if you watch the Age of Miracles video on my channel that I lay out in the beginning, that's this metaphysical kind of meta-formal system that Forrest Landry, a close collaborator of the Game B crowd, or like part of the Game B crowd, discovered. That system, the immanent metaphysics, frames everything in triplets. If you really want to find the essence of something, the second order simplicity, at the end of the day, it comes down to kind of the masculine, feminine, their dance, or yin yang, their relationship. Kind of hand wavy here, but there's this endless source of brilliant insight that comes out of the mind of Forrest Landry, because he can just share these triples and then you can play with that yourself. One of them is the triplet of vision, culture, strategy, that connects very much to what I said earlier. What's so crucial about if you identify a triplet, there's a right and wrong way of how these modalities relate. Maybe just to make this very clear now, that one of these triplets is man, machine, nature. So nature is the feminine, machine is the masculine, and man is the bridge between. And so if we want a game B, if we want to go towards that, there's a clear answer given by the metaphysics that says we need to basically employ a machine to empower us to serve nature. And then nature, then you have this upward spiral happening. But if we use machine to extract from nature for our own gains, that's a finite game that will self-terminate. And in the same way, vision, culture, strategy has a right and a wrong kind of flow. So a healthy, organic movement that is emergent starts with a vision. Like that's the initial starting point. That's all there is. Just a vision that inspires a culture. And I like to inspire, I like to kind of unpack it as incarnates its spirit. I really feel like the vision is almost like a soul of some kind of transcendent being, like a memetic organism that really incarnates into a culture, which every person is like a cell of that body. The last step of that is the strategy part. And that's where I would say the whole smart contracts and all of the brilliance of the crypto movement really shines most, is how can a culture that has the prior to thinking about strategy already has some transcendent attractor that brings them together and makes them stick around and really want to do this, how can they then start to really implement and get shit done? So that's really how I see the symbiosis between the kind of visionary storytelling and then this instrument of coordination that I see in the crypto space. And maybe just to add that here, I go into more depth, I think, in the Custodian of the Noosphere video on my channel, but the inversion of that flow gives you the pathology of game A. So you start, in the inversion of that flow is you start with strategy. And that's like fearful human beings that think they need to control reality. They start just with this. They don't have a choice. They're in this fearful state of mind. So they're like, I need a strategy for control. And then downstream of that, they find other people that temporarily will serve them to control reality. But it's not a real, it's not a real heartfelt connection. It's more like, right now it makes sense to collaborate, kind of like mafiosi coming together as long as it makes sense. And so that type of collective organization is, I wouldn't call it culture, I would call it a cult. I'm using this kind of as a metaphysical modality. And then the last step is to kind of engineer a vision, but it's not authentic. It's just what do we need to tell the masses or whoever it is that we're trying to manipulate and control? What do we need to tell them that they will do what we want them to do? Which is so different than a vision that comes to you and truly touches your heart and inspires you. So just to summarize, like vision, culture, strategy, that's what we want. Strategy called narrative that hides itself, like it markets itself as a culture, but it's really functioning like a cult. That's the thing that it's kind of hiding in plain sight in so many aspects of game A and is eating away the substrate of our society.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what speaks to me here, and I got a couple things that I could riff on, but the most immediate is that, for me, it feels like Game B isn't being invented. It's not like a new technology. It feels like it's being discovered. Like we're figuring out the fundamental laws of coordination and coordination failure in game theory and sort of reverse engineering them to figure out a priori what a system that works against them is going to look like. And I think there's something beautiful there, because it's like I said, I was tearing up watching your videos because I was so touched by how I think you've kind of like uncovered some really like a priori important things, but also like the truth behind it just like fills my heart with joy when I learn about these things. And it's like something that you don't feel when you watch a Pepsi commercial on like Super Bowl. It's just like and maybe it goes back to your sort of like difference between marketing and sense making. I'm not sure exactly what memetic tag we would call what we're doing here, but it feels like sense making, uncovering, discovering the game theoretic forces that we need to build these new systems. Yeah. And then the other reaction that I have there is that in crypto, or at least like in the systems engineering parts of crypto, we talk a lot about institutions versus exstitutions. And institutions have like a hardness to them. They're the bone. Whereas the exstitutions is kind of like the muscle or like the fascia between the bones. And I think that maybe like the intersection in a cybernetic system between the machine that we're building and the nature and the culture, at least for us, like the word that we would use for that is exstitution, the sort of like soft cultural thing that forms around an institution. And what's remarkable to me is how those things are mutually reinforcing. You have a new institution and that creates a culture around it and like a community, the next institution that sort of feeds off of it. And then if you build it in a reflexive way, that can strengthen the institution and vice versa. And maybe that's what you in your language would call an upward spiral, which I think is just a reflexive cycle that spirals upwards. Maybe I'm using the definition in the word, but like it's getting better all of the time as the network effects accrue.
Yeah, it's like upward spiral corresponds to symbiotic relationship, and downward spiral to parasitic relationship. And the institution execution, I learned about that only recently. I really like that framing. In what I just laid out with the vision, culture, strategy triple, it occurs to me that it's kind of like an institution gives rise to an execution around it. That's true. But fundamentally, metaphysically, the executional modality precedes the institutional modality. Right? I don't know. That's
I mean, I feel like it's like a chicken and the egg thing for me. But maybe at least I'm pilled on building new institutions.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I feel like I keep on trying to summarize this in a reductive way to keep the audience up with what we're like, this sort of outline of what we're talking about. But it feels like, to me, if I were to summarize, Project Liminality is sort of like your sense-making apparatus for what is even happening. How do I translate like the Gigabrain, Daniel Schmachtenberger stuff into things that are comprehensible to like our, more visual generation, to an order of magnitude more people. And then Interbrain is kind of like, once you've already made sense of it, it feels like Interbrain is like positioned as a solution, like a software system that starts to think about solving these things. Any pushback on that framing before we move forward?
No pushback, but just quick clarification. I think I brushed over that a bit quick earlier when I said music, musician, instrument. So the music is basically that's the visions. So I'm just passionate about opening myself up to receiving inspiring visions and then trying to transmit them as with the highest fidelity possible and make it as accessible and clear as possible, like making things as simple as possible but no simpler kind of thing. The musician is the type of mind that is required to make these visions become reality. So that's where I think a lot about domesticated versus liminal mind. And so, there's content on my channel exploring all of that. Then the Interbrain basically is an outgrowth of the recognition that the communication media that we are using right now to share stories with each other, to communicate with each other, are so profoundly messed up that they tend to, like we all heard this statement, like what was it? Fake news spreads 6 times faster than real news or something like that, or misinformation faster than real information. I think that
the version I've heard, the colloquial version, is the truth can, or a lie can go a mile before the truth gets off the starting line.
Exactly.
There's like the information environment is corrupted, I guess, is the summary there.
Exactly. And the medium that we're using to communicate is one where manipulation spreads so much faster than inspiration. Because you can basically, manipulation is just, you can create whatever hypernormal stimuli you like if you're not constrained by reality. And so you can, if you have a system that is just optimizing for dopamine hits, of course, manipulation will spread faster because you have much more freedom to play with if you're just trying to make things, get people click on things. The Interbrain is basically asking, okay, how can we fix this? And it's not as easy as just putting a minus sign in front of the algorithm. I would say it's you have to much more fundamentally think about what the alternative might look like, and that's where I draw a lot of inspiration from indigenous cultures. Most notably, the book Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta has been a huge influence on me, and this whole idea of stories as living beings, and then symbols. Sand Talk symbols in that book, I now expanded into Dream Talk. That's the stuff you see in my videos. Symbols to relate to these living beings. And basically the Interbrain, the stories themselves are equally users of the system like as the people. So if you participate in the Interbrain, you're using it, and you're also part of the infrastructure for stories to flow through the collective. That's just a bit more clarity, I hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to pivot the conversation into Interbrain because I'm sort of like fascinated by it. And as a software developer, systems architect, also trying to figure out how to get people to use systems that feel more game B-y. And there's an interesting analog in my brain, and I don't know if you've thought of it this way before, but blockchains are basically a distributed system in which nodes can come to consensus about a distributed ledger. And this is actually really important because traditionally in banking, whoever has the ledger sort of has power over everyone because they can change everyone's bank accounts. In blockchains and distributed consensus mechanisms like Nakamoto consensus are a way through which different ledgers can come to consensus for each other. And when I first learned about Interbrain and watched the video on your YouTube about it, I noticed an interesting sort of analog between the way blockchain systems without a central intermediary come to consensus about the reality of a ledger, which is, a totally like quantized set of systems, to like the Interbrain, which feels like a medium for not achieving consensus, but a distributed storytelling mechanism that doesn't have the corruption of the attention economy. And there's just sort of like an interesting parallel there. But I don't know, I'm also a crypto bro, so like maybe to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to use this rant as like a jumping off point into Interbrain. So like, how does it work? If I'm a listener, can I use it? And what's your vision for where this is going and how it solves the problems that we talked about on the top half of the episode?
Let me plant a flag here. If we remember it, we can go back to that analogy with the blockchain and the Interbrain, because I think you can frame it as a metaphysical blockchain. And but let me first explain what the Interbrain is.
Those are terms I think this audience would really enjoy, but we'll come back.
Yeah. So, basically the Interbrain, first of all, that name emerged from me, just, sensing into what's out there in terms of, like indigenous people talk a lot about knowledge, being alive, and like knowledge is a huge term in the book Sand Talk. And so I was looking, okay, what is out there in terms of tools that help us relate to our knowledge. So Obsidian came on my radar, and Obsidian is framed as the second brain. So basically you have your vault and you create mostly text-based representations of the knowledge that is meaningful to you. So you like a digital twin of your brain in a sense. And so I was thinking about, prior to discovering Obsidian, I thought about what back then I just called Project Liminality, like how could this alternative to the current social media landscape look like? Then looking at the second brain that is Obsidian, I was thinking, okay, there should be a way to get this idea into the world as a plugin for Obsidian, which I now call the Interbrain, with the idea that it basically connects together all these many second brains out there that most people are building in isolation. And Obsidian falls under the category of personal knowledge management tools, which already carries so much implicit in our attitude towards what knowledge is. The personal kind of implies that it's an isolated endeavor to relate to knowledge, and the management side of things views knowledge a bit as a mechanistic thing, like it's more an engineering project. And so that's, from what I can tell, not how an indigenous mind would approach it. So the Interbrain is also, you can think of it like how would the internet or the digital realm look like if an indigenous mind kind of architected it. And so with the Interbrain, I want to take the personal knowledge management paradigm that is found in second brain Obsidian and transition to what I like to contrast it with as collective knowledge gardening. So the inter means we connect everything, and gardening is just this different attitude towards what knowledge is. And basically what you do is the entire thing is built on top of the Git protocol. That I was early on super inspired discovering just how amazing and how refined the open source software ecosystem already is. Like it blew my mind just how incredible the collaboration and the open source sharing and tons of mechanisms that have been refined over decades by brilliant people are already out there.
It's really beautiful and immersion. And just sorry to interrupt your, I just want to say that that's what got me into starting Gitcoin back in the day, was the beautiful emergent open source infrastructure that we all take for granted.
Yeah, but what then also blew my mind is that no one, most, like the vast majority of people using Git are using it exclusively for software. And I know this is what it was built for, but it's just completely, without changing anything about it, you can use it for any type of knowledge. Some nuances there. Of course, it's optimized for code and stuff like that, but for free, you can expand it to the entire class of knowledge with almost no tweaks necessary. And that's a cultural shift. That's not a technological one. And so when I first discovered that, that was during a time when I discovered this liminal web and the podcast landscape, and it just blew my mind. Like, it took me a while to reflect on that, like how much more, like orders of magnitude more I was learning, listening to Daniel Schmackenberger, Brett Weinstein, Jim Rudd, like people, all of these conversations, and how effortless I learned all of these things compared to what I was going through in university, which was extremely hard and super frustrating. And I wanted to share what I learned. And then I discovered this open source software infrastructure, and I was like, okay, this has to somehow come together. And then the last piece is that I also read the book Sand Talk, which was all about the symbols, while being obsessed with a YouTube channel called 3 Blue 1 Brown, run by Grant Sanderson. It's magnificent. Like, this guy is next level. And so he developed his own Python library to create, to visualize mathematical concepts, but like in a beautiful way. And so then it was like, oh, these symbols can be created through code, which can be hosted on Git repositories, basically. So we can, and then we can introduce a spoken word, which I was seeing from the podcast landscape as for me at least, the far superior medium of education and communication. And we can all put that all together to create something that kind of takes the Sand Talk and this indigenous modality and puts it into the digital realm without diluting and kind of messing up all of the things that make this indigenous modality so powerful, and just adding all of the good stuff that comes through the digital, which is, like you can share everything infinitely and this interconnectedness across the planet and things like that. So all of this comes together in the Interbrain. Fundamentally what it is it shifts the entire concept of how communication in the digital works from what I like to call it from monologos-centric to dialogos-centric. So dialogue for like novel speak here. Like, it's just the video call becomes the fundamental modality for how knowledge flows through and thus shapes the collective. And monologos is the term for when you, for example, watch a YouTube video or read a Wikipedia article, anything where you and the screen are alone and the screen talks to you and you don't talk to the screen, basically. It flows in one direction, and it's kind of cold knowledge, borrowing from Nora Bateson's kind of idea of warm data. It's kind of cold data coming in through your eyeballs, rather than having a free-flowing embodied conversation with someone where it's much more warm and alive, the knowledge that is being transmitted. So the entire thing, the Interbrain itself, basically in its essence is a conversational co-pilot. Just like back in the day, we, like in ancient times, we used to meet around the campfire and then we were talking. And then when we were talking, for example, about the concept of polarity and the yin yang, we could draw the symbol in the sand, which helps a ton to communicate that concept. And so the Interbrain allows you to do the same thing, but in the digital. So we talk about some idea, like we have been doing all along here in this podcast. But every time I have a digital twin of that idea in my, I like to call it dream garden, but in your Interbrain, basically, you can pull up that dream node, which is just a rebranding of Git repositories, that has like a thumbnail that is whatever the symbol is that you came up with or that someone else came up with to represent that idea. And so we would just do the human thing, and you talk with your peers, people that you genuinely are interested in and trust and like, and we educate each other about all of the beautiful things we learned. But while we do that, we actually have a mechanism that allows us to offer the other person like just the URL to clone the corresponding dream node into their own dream, in their own Interbrain, basically. And so you can enhance the communication by using these symbols, but every transmission of a concept becomes an invitation to collaborate on the idea, just like any open source software project would. So yeah, that's the essential flow. And then there's this last piece, which really, I think that's where, so just shifting to video calls as the primary way of relating is already so much more healthy, so much more immune to manipulation. It's just, so much of the mass manipulation that occurs through social media just falls flat if most people just talk to their friends in depth and really look at ideas from all directions. But the real thing that then kind of brings that point home, I would say, is what a mechanism that I call the coherence beacon. And again, it's just Git at its core reinterpreted, where if we start to encapsulate our knowledge into dream nodes, and like in the same thing that the software module is encapsulated in, we are able to import these ideas into larger ideas as submodules, and basically do the Hegelian dialectic, a thing that I learned from Daniel Schmachtenberger, which was hugely influential on me. The metaphor is basically a cylinder looks like a circle from one side, a square from the other side, but it's really a cylinder. And so you can have infinite fighting about who's right when people are looking from orthogonal directions at the same thing.
Dialectic, is that just seeing something in 3 dimension from multiple perspectives? Is that like the metaphor there?
Yeah, it's like looking at the thesis. Oh, the thesis, it's a circle, and then, but these people over there provide an antithesis or an antithesis. Oh no, it's really a square. And then you look at, okay, how can I integrate that into the synthesis? And there's a larger structure, a higher dimensional perspective, or something that transcends all these perspectives, that integrates them into a larger truth that has no paradox. Like you resolve the paradox. And of course, this is just a metaphor because the cylinder itself on another level might be another circle. And then there's another square and another cylinder, and you can do this ad infinitum, basically. I like to call this the liminal flow, where you just collect the dots and connect the dots in that way and let it carry you wherever you're meant to go. And you can do that explicitly in the Interbrain by literally taking these dream nodes, synthesizing them by importing them into some larger, higher order dream node. And then these symbols that you came up with to represent these ideas, you can explicitly just use them, just like the media directory in open source software project, have the file path point into the submodules and use them in this larger context to explain this larger idea. And basically they become more than the sum of their parts. When you do that, you basically trigger the coherence beacon, which means you offer this particular synthesis, the cylinder, to all of your peers that hold either the circle or the square component that you use to build that cylinder. And so they will just get an invitation basically from someone they trust, that, hey, I think the piece you're holding is valid and even more powerful in this larger context where you have some story to tell that only you can tell because you're holding that piece. And then they can see if it resonates. If it doesn't, they reject it. That's okay. Everyone is it's all invitation based. But if they accept it, they join this larger story, basically. They now hold this larger dream node and they extend the signal to all of their peers. And this is like a recursive process. And at each point, it's a resonance filter. Like, does it resonate or not? And this is what I could think is the closest we could ever get to an authority is just the collective resonance. Like, what else could you want than the story that resonates with everyone?
This brings me back a little bit to Nakamoto consensus in blockchains is really trying to achieve distributed consensus about what the ledger is, and decentralized resonance. Is that what you call it?
The social resonance filter or the coherence beacon? Yeah.
It feels like there's a fractal here between social resonance and Nakamoto consensus to me, but I don't know. Maybe it's just a blockchain bro take.
Well, that goes back to the kind of blockchain versus metaphysical blockchain kind of thing.
Yeah.
I heard this once, a sentence from Galahad Eridanus. Highly recommend everyone checking out that YouTube channel. It's fantastic. He said at one point, I don't want you to see what I see. I want you to look at where I'm looking and tell me what you see. And so that is a different type of coherence, where we actually value the difference in perspective, and we can start to align towards the same direction, but we don't have to share the current position. And I think that is the original Bitcoin blockchain. That's really like we always are on the same page. There's a more gentle way of catalyzing coherence, which is more like, let's through resonance start to walk more and more into the same direction. And we don't have to have the same truth all the time, but we just have the same orientation, but more and more same orientation. That's a bit of the contrast there.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is really exciting. I want to prototype it for creating more resonance around Gitcoin and the regen Web3 space. And I think that it would be useful in that way. I'm curious to see how, this becomes something that's used more often and creates more resonance more often. And also like a little bit like worried that just know what I know about the attention economy and where the gravity wells of attention are in the internet. It's towards the things that release the most dopamine rush. Like people go to the internet not to be informed or educated in many cases, but to be entertained. And so like, how do we get out of the gravity well of people just scrolling Instagram mindlessly and instead,
Right.
syncing their Interbrain to each other? And it feels like there's like a cultural, it's almost like analogous to like eating your vegetables instead of eating like just sugar and like candy or something like that. Like we have to teach people to eat their vegetables does that make us the lame sort of like reactionary? I don't know, like maybe I'm getting too far down exploring this, but like, how do we get out of the gravity well of the existing attention economy? I guess is like is something that's at the tip of my tongue here.
Yeah. So there are two important aspects to the answer here. One is, that quote probably from the whole game B space, Ilya Prigozhin, in chaotic systems, small islands of coherence can shift the larger system. And so there's a slogan that came to mind. Funny that's a slogan, but about what I talked about earlier with the manipulation with inspiration. The Interbrain, I want attention on that to scale not through marketing, but through miracles. So it's like miracles over marketing. That's kind of the attitude that I have towards how does it get into the world. And that a miracle here would, and I go into that in depth in the Edge of Miracles, but basically it's when small groups, small islands of coherence form that shift the larger system. The GameStop miracle is the most tangible thing in recent years that I could point to, where something truly interesting happened, where there were small islands of coherence that really did something no one expected to happen. Of course, the inspiration it caused in the larger population is limited. It's like, okay, they made a hedge fund go bankrupt, and this David Goliath kind of thing. It was definitely inspiring, but there are much more powerful miracles that can be achieved. Breakthrough technologies that solve the climate and pollution crisis, treat healing cancer, whatever it is, stopping wars. And that requires a small group, or that doesn't require more than small islands of coherence that are highly capable and really get shit done. And then people will ask, how did they do that? And if the Interbrain turns out to be a key ingredient of that will have this natural bottoms-up kind of attention attractor. That's one aspect of it, and that's really like that's almost my full attention goes there. Like I know many people, and we will do great things together once all of these things reach maturity, and it will hopefully inspire more people to kind of join the call. But then there is this other side of things, and that is are you familiar with Ken Wilber and integral theory?
I am, but it might be useful to have a quick recap for the audience.
Right. So basically, Ken Wilber built just this humongous cylinder out of like putting together so many different conflicting theories or perspectives on reality. The materialist, scientific, the mystical, the spiritual, and all of these schools of thought. He integrated them all into integral theory. And there are many aspects to what integral theory is. But one that is kind of meaningful here is all of the world religions that we have, or all of these kind of systems, these traditions out there, there are different levels of understanding about what they are about. And so consciousness evolves through these different, I think it's colors and integral theory. I forget the exact language, but basically
spiral dynamics thing where we start getting like purple and like animalistic, and then like we go up towards red and orange. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the general insight is that basically consciousness evolves through these different levels, and you basically, the higher the level, the more integrated your world you become, the more accepting of difference you become, etc. And then there's like the integral stage, the highest stage that kind of integral theory points to, where basically you have no enemies and you just see everyone is holding a piece of the truth, and you're only seeking how does it fit together. That's the type of mind there. And so yeah, there's this idea that all the world religions at the highest expression point to the exact same thing. It's like one mountain, many paths up there. And but at the lower expressions you have stuff like jihad and things like that, which are far off from the core of all of these traditions. And so Ken Wilber said this once, that we need conveyor belts. We need to meet people where they are, and then we need to build conveyor belts so they can always take the next step. And so you completely fully accept where they are. You just offer, here's the next step if you want to take it. And you can do that by coming together and, designing a course or stuff like that for people. I'm interested in how can we find a system where that emerges organically by default. And that's what the Interbrain, I think, can afford in terms of healing the kind of addiction to dopamine spike that leads to this completely evaporated attention span that we have now in the population. Like there's a significant fraction of the population that literally cannot watch a video if it's more than 5 minutes. And so with the Interbrain, you can basically start to build memetic conveyor belts and pick up people where they are. So you create a beautiful piece of content that is short and snappy, 2 minutes, and it beautifully frames something they care about. They hold it in there, and they wouldn't need to use the Interbrain. You can co-create all of that inside of the Interbrain, but share it with the larger world. Like the memetic medicine can be exported to the larger world. But then basically once someone resonates with a piece of content, it might be super short, in the self-organizing nature of the Interbrain, it will point to, every time someone finds a larger story that it is part of, it will point to that larger story, which always will take your attention span a bit wider and wider and wider. And the level of sophistication of how you relate to reality will become more and more increased. And this can hopefully build this liminal flow, basically, for people, like this emergent self-organizing conveyor belt to meet people where they are and start, maybe it will start with memetic medicine about how to start treating or overcoming the worst aspects of social media addiction. Maybe that's the first step, and they will resonate with that, and then their mind is a bit more ready to take the next step, etc. So that's a whole another aspect of how the Interbrain could heal the world, I guess.
Right. So just to summarize it, like, I guess creating a memetic conveyor belt is one direction, and then the other direction is creating small islands of coherence that catalyze the greater whole.
Yeah.
Okay. I always feel like we have these like beautiful, rich chocolate cake conversations, and I try to summarize it in like 3 words for the audience, which reduces it down. But hopefully that creates more understanding. I wonder if DAOs, like, I wonder if I could prototype this at Gitcoin as we're building Gitcoin 3.0, and like be one of those small islands of coherence and use it as a way of creating more coherence around Gitcoin. Because like we have these governance forums and sort of like token votes, but like some of the conversations of the governance forum can be a little bit like terse and like rude to each other. And if there was an upstream sense making like Interbrain process that we all committed to together, I'm wondering how much that would create more like downstream coherence in the voting and do it in a way that isn't captured by like the benevolent dictator or anything like that. Like isn't centralized. And so, I'm wondering if DAOs could be like a way of creating that small coherence so if you're open to that, we should talk after the episode. But like, do you have like a pilot set of early users? Are you building Interbrain around Interbrain or anything like that? Like, who are your pilot customers?
So you asked earlier, can I use it? So right now you cannot use it, but it's very close to usability. I'm building it as we speak. And basically the backers on Open Collective receive updates, but you can also just go to the page to see kind of what's new. And very soon the first kind of rollout of that will occur as an Obsidian plugin. And just quickly to address what you said, so basically in the Interbrain, everything is a dream node, like literally, and the Interbrain itself is a dream node. Like it's a software project, right? That's kind of self-referential. And the idea is that a dream node, like whatever thing, like everything, every ontic entity, like whatever is a meaningful thing in your ontology, in whatever digital thing you're working on, is a dream node in the Interbrain. So if it's an AI agent, that can be inside of a dream node. If it's a DAO, that can be built around a dream node, etc. So a dream node is, first of all, it's just a Git repository, but in potential, like just at least philosophically, in potential, it can be all of these things. And that's the exciting thing for me. Like imagine, in an alternative universe where the Interbrain preceded the blockchain, and you had just friends talking about on the Interbrain, like, oh, we need an alternative to banking, and they create dream nodes to represent the core insights. And then someone starts to think about how to use cryptography for decentralized consensus and stuff. And this just grows and grows and grows. And at some point, it's like, oh, actually, we can, like in the same repository that we're working on the knowledge itself, we can also start to work on the source code. And suddenly it becomes this thing. And then next moment, oh, we can turn it into a DAO that precedes the blockchain. Doesn't make sense, but whatever. So the idea is that literally every dream node is a memetic tribe, and most of these memetic tribes just have one member, which is you, if you create it, and everyone you tell about it that takes it in because it resonates becomes part of the memetic tribe. So vision inspires culture, and then the strategy part is like whatever that thing needs to be, we can build it in there because there's nothing in the digital that cannot be expressed inside of a Git repository. So that's the fundamental idea there.
Yeah, I love how you're reusing existing tech here also. I mean, Git's such like a hardened technology that it reminds me a little bit of Radical, and there's a Web3 project called Radical that was using Git under the hood for a little while, and then there's also a Scuttlebutt is a technology that is in this category. But leaving your brain to try. Go ahead.
I'm well aware for this version of the Interbrain, Radical will be used. So yeah.
Okay. Word. We're over time, so I got to start asking some wrap-up questions, but I've really enjoyed the conversation so far. Is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say?
Nothing really comes to mind, so I think we covered the most important things.
Okay. In a world in which you're maximally successful in 10 years, what does that look like? So take us to 2035, and Interbrain's maximally useful. Your YouTube channel has got tens of hits a year. Like, paint me a picture of that world.
It's unrecognizable to what we're living in right now. We have solved poverty, all types of inequalities. We have unleashed this insane amount of potential that most people are not even aware of right now. We have brought so many. We have, with a lot of wisdom, decided which of the suppressed technologies that are one of the pathologies of game A is that industries tend to suppress technologies that threaten industries. With a lot of wisdom, we have discerned exactly which of those when to bring out and stuff like that. Money is very different. We have people recognize that abundance is something that is only real if it's shared. So the wealth concentration vector has been flipped many years ago, and at this point, in what was it, 2035, the like the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy has completely been chopped off. This is not a concern anymore, and people are completely only occupied with the question of how can they bring out their most their unique gifts to and become their most unique self, and they have lost interest in being special. I would say that's a big part of it, and just the universal genius that dwells within the minds of the human family has been unleashed to an extent that no one could even imagine right now.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Such a hopeful place to end. If you're listening and you discovered David for the first time, highly encourage you to subscribe to his YouTube channel, Project Liminality. It's in the show notes. And then there's also an open collective. I'll be contributing. Would recommend that other people check that out as well. But David, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
We just heard from David Rugg. I think he is an incredibly articulate and immaculate storyteller. I encourage you to check out his YouTube channel and his open collective. Thanks for listening to the Allo.Capital podcast. Again, we are building the capital allocation layer of the post-AI, post-tokenization internet. Disclaimer, this podcast is for informative purposes only and is not financial advice. Do your own research. Do not make any financial decisions based off of these episodes. In addition, I own crypto assets like ETH, DAI, USDC, and GTC. All right, thanks for listening. See you on the next one. Peace and love.